I want to call on the CEO of the Malaysia Institute for Debate and Public Speaking, Ahmed Faris Ahmed, for his opening remarks. Thanks, mate. Good morning, everyone. It's always great to see non-debaters at our event. So it's been us debating amongst us, the bubble, been quite like it. Very quickly, I think it's about time that I introduce MIDP because I'm not surprised if most of you have not heard the Malaysian Institute for Debate and Public Speaking. If anything, I did myself. So if I may introduce, we started in 2010, so we've been around for 8 years now. We'll basically teach debates and public speaking, and our goal has always been to facilitate the promotion of debate and public speaking as a tool for human capital development. We work with the ministry, we're appointed by the ministry to train management fund the national debate team to plan World Schools Debating Championship. On top of that, we run debate events as well. We just recently concluded the second biggest debating tournament in the world. It's called the Australasian Vast Debating Championship, which we had debaters from Australia, New Zealand, and throughout Asia coming here to Malaysia debating at It was an 8-day event, it's prestigious, it's included. And we do a lot more as well in the past. So that's MIDP. But a lot more that I want to talk about is Malaysia as a debating circuit. It's extremely vibrant and active. We have debate tournaments every other weekend. Part of our efforts, our bottom-up effort to empower schools and universities to host on their own, just so that we get to provide more exposure to our debaters and public speakers as well. And Malaysia is a powerhouse in the global debating circuit. If you haven't heard, Malaysia, for example, we had IIU that won the Asian Debating Championship 2 years in a row, and won Cambridge Library similarly to UiTM that was ranked second best in the world for 2 years in a row as well. We had 4th best speaker in the world here, Mizal, that reached out to you to invite you as a speaker of this event. So we've done great. On top of that, I guess it's about time that I also talk about the debaters. We are natural advocates of social issues. We talk about debate, we talk about all these issues every other weekend. One debate tournament would have a good 8 debate topics that we'll talk about that ranges from sports to international relations to sexuality and religion, and also on mental health. We've spoken about it in the past. And the good thing about debaters as natural advocates is that we understand, mostly because of our competitive nature. So we want to win debate tournaments, so we read up. So that, and the moment you read out, we become more and more aware of the issues, and we empathize a lot more, and lastly, we understand. The problem with debate tournaments is that it happens in a bubble. So oftentimes, the things that we say does not reach out to the public. And here we are today, which is pretty much the inspiration of work of the weekend of Knowledge Evolution, because we need help, we need guidance. So we are a platform, we are a group of people that are able to speak on all these things, but we don't know how to reach out to the general public. We don't know how to make that change, and therefore we reach out to community leaders and social champions of social issues in order to create awareness, really. And moving forward through our debate platforms, we'll be able to discuss about it and eventually, look into the future and come up with the best solutions to solve the issues at hand today. So I don't want to speak any further. So happy to see you here. What's going to happen next is the debate, and I'll be sharing that debate, and then the forum, which we will be learning and listening to you. And after this forum, I think it's about time that we sit and discuss about moving forward. How do we ensure that mental health will get the awareness that it deserves? Until then, thank you very much for being here. Welcome, and I hope you enjoy the show. Right, for the debate, let's invite both teams up on stage. While they do that, allow me to just quickly give you on the format of the debate. It's each speaker will be given 5 minutes. There will be POIs, which means points of information, just basically an interjection during their speech. So if, let's say, the team from this side, they're speaking, and anyone from that side of the house will be able to stand up and interject and ask questions while we're speaking. So that is allowed. Other than that, the motion of the debate is this House prefers that the media never reports on instances of suicide. Without further ado, I want to invite the first speaker of the government bench, Calvin coaches the national debate team and is a two-time finalist at the Malaysian National Championships. He'll have a law degree soon, so please give him a job. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the Prime Minister to start the debate.
Good morning. We are speaking here in front of a panel who are very, very knowledgeable on this particular topic issue. And I think all three of us put together in terms of knowledge probably pale in comparison. So excuse us as we proceed with some difficulties, as we attempt to make some assertions about mental health and the behaviors of individuals in society when it comes to them seeing reports on suicide. So in my speech, I'm going to provide the proposition case across three broad areas. The first is I'm going to provide some principal reasons as to why we oppose the media reporting on instances of suicide. Secondly, I'm going to talk about some outcomes associated with the report. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about why we are okay with the loss of some discussion on suicide if it means a number of people are protected, a number of vulnerable people are protected from taking that step as well. So, what do we support? We support helplines, we support befrienders, the normal mechanisms that we have to help individuals who are suffering from mental illnesses. We also generally support reporting on an aggregate of cases. So, to present data in a way that suggests in this particular area or in this particular geographic area, there is a high number of suicides. But we will not report on individual cases. So, for example, things like that little girl who killed herself after she stole a mobile phone. So, firstly, why do we principally oppose this? I think oftentimes individual instances of suicide being reported does not give the closest grieving individuals control over the media narrative that comes about, right? So the nature of the report, how triggering it might be, how sensitive it might be, often goes out of the control of grieving individuals. And this is very, very harmful to them because often they don't want to be constantly reminded of the pain and suffering that they have gone through. Secondly, I think it's worth noting as well that often media companies have a very strong profit motive in how they sensationalize news. So they are using this news often to create more and more profit for themselves. There's something insidious and morally egregious about this. So I think these are good principal reasons, void of outcomes, for us to oppose the reporting on instances of suicide. Secondly, what are the outcomes associated with the report in itself? Right? So we would argue that firstly, mentally ill people are likely to be devastated by the kind of discussion surrounding the report, right? So often when you have an initial report talking about that instance of suicide, the discussion and the comments and feedback that you get from netizens or individuals online on that particular report is often quite toxic, right? They do things like they blame the victim for being too cowardly. They don't talk about the core reasons why that victim was pushed to that particular area. They bring up religious sentiments that further scare other sufferers of mental illness. And I think this is particularly problematic for individuals who are going through similar problems. So obviously there will be some empathetic voices that will say, they will empathize, they will say it's okay, that we need to try and fix this problem, that we need to talk to teachers about these things. But we have to focus on individuals who are suffering from mental illnesses, often individuals who perhaps have very low serotonin levels. It's very difficult for them to focus on things, positive and empathetic feedback, but it's easy for them to get distracted by all this negative feedback that's provided to them, right? But the second reason is that mentally ill people are also incredibly vulnerable and impressionable. There's a reason why statistically, across the board, suicide rates tend to be higher on Mondays. They tend to be lower on an aggregate during the festive season. It's because individuals who are suffering from mental illnesses are easily affected by the surrounding circumstances that affect them, right? So And a particular harm from this is things like copycat suicide. When Robin Williams died, we saw a 10% increase in suicide cases that month. When you saw Marilyn Monroe die, there was a 12% increase in suicide cases during that month, right? So copycat suicides, for example, from individuals who are mentally ill and also vulnerable are very real and substantial harm that happens when we have reporting on very specific instances of suicide, right? This is less likely to happen when we report on an aggregate of cases that suggest we are moving towards this direction or there's an increase in the number of suicide cases that we probably need to resolve. The reason for this is probably because people feel that the problem that they're facing is best solved through this particular method, since someone they looked up to solve their problem with this particular method as well. And perhaps also sometimes when you see people giving attention to these individuals, you are likely to want to gain that same kind of attention as well, right? So this is why the World Health Organization has recommended a reduction on the reporting on suicide cases in general. So lastly, the loss of some discussion. I think obviously there are some, when you stop reporting on these individual instances, maybe we talk about suicide rates. But we need to talk about whether or not the reporting on these individual instances are actually valuable to begin with, right? So the little girl who killed herself because someone stole there was a report that she stole a mobile phone. Like, we didn't really see an increase or standards set on how teachers should behave when it comes to handling children, or how they should be psychologically prepared to deal with children. But we just saw an instance where this particular teacher was criticized. So most of the time, the policy changes that often come out of reporting on suicide comes out from reports that talk about the aggregate of cases, meaning there's a high rate of suicide across this particular age group or in this particular area. That's the kind of reporting that we support, right? So in conclusion, we will argue that there is a certainty that when you report on individual instances of suicide, that people are likely to take similar steps and kill themselves. But there's an uncertainty on the negative side of this debate, where when you do report on these individual instances of suicide, then it will actually lead to actual policy change, right? So we would prioritize protecting individuals who are most vulnerable, and for those reasons, we are very, very happy to propose.
Thank Prime Minister for opening this debate. To open the debate on behalf of the opposition, the next speaker, Joshua Varghese. He's a quick write-up. In his years of living in Dubai, Joshua has been the best high school speaker of the UAE and the British schools of the Middle East. Currently, Joshua is making his mark in Malaysian debating, having reached the finals of several national InterVarsity championships, and is to speak for his homeland Malaysia at the World Schools Debating Championships. He has recently graduated from MCKL and is looking forward to reading politics, philosophy, and economics in the UK. Next speaker, Leader of Opposition. Here.
Yes. Right now, someone close to us is very likely drowning in suicidal thoughts. Right now, the tears of Malaysians flow for the youth that is twice as likely to take their life compared to the average citizen. But right now, that very same society that allowed our brothers and sisters to fall through the cracks would like to keep them in the dark. When being open and having meaningful discussions can literally be the factor that keeps millions of our friends fighting and continuing the fight, the media ought to speak and speak loudly. Two arguments in this debate. The first, why the media has a principal obligation to report these suicide cases. And the second, having the media report about suicide is better than less harmful sources that their side needs to rely on. The first argument, the principal obligation of the media. Given that the media has a significant platform to report about important issues that affect society at large, they definitely have a duty to report on the pervasive issue of mental health and its links to suicide. This is especially important given the fact that in 2016 alone, around 8,000 people reached out to befrienders and a local NGO dealing with people with suicidal thoughts. What will these platforms and organizations do to help in the media. It can look like a 10,000 step program that our government launched and was pushed by the media to try to solve the national epidemic of obesity in our country, right? Similarly, talking about individual cases of suicide is even more urgently required to break the malicious taboos that exist around talking about mental health and suicide. Many of us only need to recall how hard it must have been to approach our own parents and experts talking about sensitive issues, given the established cultures of silence that pervade our society at large in Malaysia. We push for the media on our side to talk about and change the narratives where it matters. Watching good journalism, coupled with advice of the experts that are here with us today as well, will repeatedly remind those suffering that there are always ways to help you, and that the rest of us can make the lives of those suffering a lot easier. This is the type of narratives of the media that on our side will push forward aggressively, because those are narratives that are often lost out in our homes, in our schools, in the very types of places that are filled with the most vulnerable people that we ought to support on our side of the house. More people are likely to reach out. That is the conclusion that we'd like to defend. The second argument, by having the media report about suicide is better than less accountable sources. It may be true that the media sensationalizes the news to maximize viewership, and this can be true about reporting about suicide cases too. However, the mainstream media generally is the most objective source of news for the greatest number of people. So this is the nuance lost from proposition. It is seen most notably when news channels like the CNN constantly fact-check the Donald every time it comes up to his rallies, and are obligated, even in our Benama News TV channels as well, to list out their sources, to name who they're reporting to constantly seek out experts in our National Health Ministry as well, when reporting about issues about mental health, about suicide. These are the type of people you're likely to see time and time again give out their objective facts on the TV. No, thank you. I'll take it. When the mainstream media reports on this, right, what happens without the mainstream media? The suicide news will still spread, but it will spread using Reddit facts or Facebook post-truths, right? Those in family WhatsApp groups will know best how pernicious half-truths can travel and spread disinformation on such a large scale, because authors are not limited by the constraints of facts that the mainstream media is in our modern day society. The same netizens that bash people and bash suicide victims that their side talks about now monopolize the discussion about what suicide means, what these people are going through. Every time you only rely on Reddit and Facebook to see what suicide is in the media, to rely on citizen journalists to skew the narrative that what suicide is, it isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to talk about and speak about proudly from all those people. But before moving on, yes.
Look, we don't claim that news agencies are going to be spreading lies. In fact, they will fact check. But the honest truth is, the way these facts are portrayed are oftentimes in details that are very triggering to vulnerable individuals.
So the comparative is very simple. On their side of the house, they would have Reddit people, Reddit supporters, they'll have Facebook journalists reporting on suicide. These people are less constrained by what the viscerality of suicide is, because they have no incentive to. They are more likely to sensationalize it. On our side, we offer a counter-narrative. We offer a more liberalizing narrative, constrained by facts and experts that are more likely to have a place at the table to speak about suicide, rather than relying on the monopoly that happens when you only allow people online and citizen journalists to monopolize whatever the discussion is about. So comparatively, the more accountable mainstream media doesn't have to speak, media speaking about suicide means the most vulnerable members of society don't have to settle for less, don't have to settle for fake news. The fact that all of us are gathered here today to discuss the issue proves how important it is to society. My speech may be ending now, but please don't silence the struggles of millions who are silent now and just want a voice to speak up.
We thank Leader of Opposition for that speech. The next speaker, Deepan Kumar, or more widely known as Loopy, sometimes forgets that they are a first-year Taylor's University student that is pursuing a degree in finance and economics, mostly because they spend more time in DB training than attending lectures. They are the current champion of Taylor's pre-Australs and also just concluded their first Australs, where they made the English as Second Language category grand finals and also bagged the 4th Best English as Second Language Speaker Award. Next speech we invite the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
I think the most powerful and subsequently the most harmful thing for any depressed person or someone who is mentally ill to feel is the feeling of being able to relate with someone who just ended their life. And this is done through specific instance reporting. When you see, as a trans person, that another trans person who ended their life also were very distant with their family. When you see that a trans person's last discussion with their friends didn't indicate that they were depressed. All of this reminds you that you could be that person and that you could also be capable of ending your life. This is the kind of psyche and mental space that these individuals are more likely to be in when you have specific instance media reporting when it comes to suicide. Because you enable individuals to see themselves in that situation, and that makes the idea of being in the same outcome as that person more palatable. I'll talk about two things in my speech. Firstly, I'll extend a little bit more on the psyche when it comes to copycat suicides. And secondarily, more to the Malaysian context, I'll talk a little bit about religion and how media, instance reporting when it comes to media, is more likely to inflame religious rhetoric and make it difficult for people to opt into recourses, such as being able to seek help to befriend this. The first thing about confirmation bias, but just really quick response in this, right? I think the speaker before me said that these discussions will still happen on Reddit anyway. People are still going to be privy to these discussions. But that doesn't engage with the fact that media corporations have an inordinate capacity to use their journalists to go out there and find those information. The fact that they are profit incentivized means that on a scale, these people are going to be more likely to find information about specific instances that otherwise you would not be able to find under our world, which we are okay with censoring. So obviously this debate has to function in a world where we are okay with trading off this information or having this information existing. Kind of is like disingenuous for us to hear that the information would exist anyway, especially when like people on Reddit don't have the same capacity as media organizations. But on copycat suicides, I just want to talk a couple of things when it comes to the instances when it comes to media reporting on suicide. Because I think the first thing that you're more likely to also see is because of the fact that they're profit incentivized, they are more likely to romanticize the idea of suicide. We've seen this in the past through headlines of reporting when it comes to suicide, like high school sweetheart's suicide pact, making it seem as though it is something that is like that has a positive connotation to it. All of this means that as a person thinking as a person who is depressed, who is considering suicide, and the one barrier between you and actually committing suicide is the fear of suicide, this romanticization comes into play and makes the idea of committing suicide a little bit more palatable. And we think that's significantly harmful to that person. But the second thing to this is the idea of visibility of hate that you amplify under opposition's world. Because in their world, you will still see people talking about specific instances of suicide. Like, for example, when Robin Williams ended his life, people on Twitter went out and said that he was a selfish person, that he was actually someone who never had other people's well-being in their regard. And as a result, they were a bad person. When you amplify these kinds of hate rhetoric as a result of like a mass amount of reporting happening on suicide, people who are depressed generally gravitate towards the harmful messages as opposed to the positive messages. Because you're already in that mental space where you're blaming yourself for all that you're feeling. You're already in that mental space where you feel like you are the one to be blamed. In all of these instances, it means that you're more likely to gravitate and resonate with the fact that this message and this harmful rhetoric is one that is attacking me and I am to be blamed for this. So you're more likely going to have individuals not being proximate or frequently seeing these kinds of messages under our world, which means it's greater capacity for you to internalize and talk your way out of the mental space that you're currently in. But the next thing I want to say under this is this culture of open sharing that happens as a result of suicide reporting. And it goes a little bit like this. I think recently everyone knows that Anthony Bourdain unfortunately took his life. And as a result of him taking his life, everybody went on Facebook and Twitter and started talking about how, oh, he was such a great person. My entire childhood was framed around how great of a traveler he was, and he was such a fantastic person. To any depressed person who is considering suicide, their mental space is more likely going to sound a little bit like this. It's going to be the fact that, the fact that this person ending their life means that people change their idea about Anthony Bourdain. Or the fact that that person ending their life means that people who never actually cared about me are now going to start caring about me and talking about me and giving me the same attention that I never got when I was alive, means that's a reason for me to contemplate suicide. It means it's a reason for me to, at the very least, even if I die, the people who ignored me in my life, or who mean to me, who never actually showed love to me, will repent and realize that they were horrible people and the things that they did to me were things that were necessarily harmful. I think when you enable this kind of rhetoric, you're more likely to have people to think that suicide is the way out because you think that people are more likely going to see you as a better person. I think if it is true that this debate falls down to where do we empower people best, knowledge of specific instances of suicide should be traded off in expense of the person to be able to be in a better mental space and to consider their well-being first. Thank you.
We thank Deputy Prime Minister for that speech. The next speaker is Izzat Arif. In his years reading law and debating for UiTM, Izzat was ranked 13th and 6th in Asia at the United Asians Debating Championship 2013 and 2016 respectively. As a judge, he was appointed to serve as the Deputy Chief Judge for the Malaysian Nationals 2017 and the prestigious Malaysia Debate Open 2018. Izzat is now currently the Business and Operations Manager of the Malaysian Institute for Debate Public Speaking. Put your hands together for my colleague and Deputy Leader of Opposition, Prof.
Yes. These are people like you and I, who at the same time suffer emotional pain that most can't even imagine, let it be from losing their mothers or even just simply the grave view of their everyday lives that they can't escape from. Some often want to end the pain through ending their lives, but the reality is talking about it helps. The reality is that the confidence and encouragement to talk about it is key. We cannot do it in a society that turns a blind eye to depression and suicide. We cannot do it with the government team limiting the reporting that shows that it is real and that it happens. They are willing to trade off discussions, we are not. That being said, in my speech, I'm going to cover generally one question, really. What's the best way for us to assist people who's contemplating suicide as we speak? A few different areas under this part. The first one is in regards to the biggest concern they've had from the government team, which is copycat suicides and people who feel related by the reporting of suicide by victims. But the reality of the matter is, however, is that this empathy, this relatability still exists. This relatability still exists when they are up at night at 12, up at night and looking through Reddit, up at night looking through uncredible sources in the internet, especially with the comfort of their own room, and looking through the uncredible and unaccountable information and reporting that exists when it comes to suicides. This is a lot worse for a lot of reasons. The first is the fact that the encouragement that they're going to get by the people that they're reading about in Reddit is the kind of encouragement that is harmful because of the way that the method was maybe falsely represented. The way that maybe perhaps people talked about the victims who committed suicide through Reddit. This is the same thing that won't exist if it was credible journalists who was reporting. And their argument about it being profitable for the media companies to report on it actually makes it a lot better, primarily because if they are profit-oriented, the media, then surely they also have the incentive to make sure that their information is as accountable as possible to make sure that they don't suffer the backlash by the medical community. They don't suffer the backlash of people accusing them of being sensationalists, or people accusing them that they're using false information, accusing them that they're not being sensitive to victims who are contemplating suicide right now. At the very least, under our side, information is a lot credible. At the very least, under our side, it's a lot easier for suicide victims to be able to get the information that they need in order for them to understand that this is how generally suicide is. But the reason why this information is also important, no thank you, is because we need to get a discussion going when it comes to suicide. The reality of the matter is, right now, is that how depression is, how suicide exists right now, is either unnoticed, not taken seriously by the general public, because it is not recognized as a reality that is currently existing right now. At most, people may hear a few personal stories here and there, but maybe to them that's just an extreme scenario. but not necessarily recognizing that it is a problem, that it is a problem that for us to recognize, that it is something that happens within our circles, or that's being suffered by a friend that's across the street right now, or if people show symptoms of depression, or the things that people are saying shows that they have depression, that people know and recognize that this could potentially lead to the very incidences that are being reported in the media right now. This discussion is important because it gives people the incentive to be empathetic. It gives people the incentive to want to have the discussion and talk to people, asking them whether they are okay, asking them, do you want to talk about your experiences, asking them, how do you feel when your mother passed away? This is the very discussion that doesn't exist before this, primarily because people just assume that, oh, they're just sad, or maybe I don't think they will go as far as to kill themselves. This is the very discussion that we think is extremely important, and we think that this discussion exists when we recognize that it is a problem through media reporting. Before I proceed, Kelvin.
Whether the piece of information is truthful or not truthful, it can still be dangerous to the mentally vulnerable individual. So surely on your side, with the media reporting it, it will spread to even more people than it would have if Facebook just reported it. And since you can hold the media accountable to some extent, shouldn't we then make them stop reporting these suicides?
That's fair, but the assumption there is that the spread of information, or that people feeling encouraged to kill themselves, stop under that side of the house. At the very least, on our side, while we do recognize that people may potentially feel like they want to kill themselves a lot more after this, at least there are people reaching out because people recognize that it is an issue. People recognize that there is urgency behind the fact that there are people who suffer from this. Let us welcome people out of the dark with welcoming arms by having this motion fall, by having people realize that it is a reality right now, that depression leads to suicide.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition. The next speaker, Sarah Rahim, formerly from the International Islamic University, Malaysia. Sarah is a graduate in economics. In her years of debating, she went on to become champion of United Asians Debating Championship, also Asians Debating Championship, and Cambridge Ivy ESL, besides numerous other titles. She now works in economics and policy consulting and continues her avid interest in debates. Next speaker, Government Whip.
I don't remember the last time I switched on the news and saw the news discussing instances of an individual contracting a disease or being obese, and talk about that single individual's lifestyle, what they did to contract that disease, and how exactly were their interactions with people around them. Did they do anything before dying or getting a heart attack or being diagnosed with, let's say, breast cancer or prostate cancer? The way we talk about physical diseases are in an aggregate sense, because we realize that these are diseases that must be tackled, that experts and panels must talk about them and address them. On the contrast, the way we talk about mental diseases and mental illnesses are sensationalizing the life of that single individual. What they did the night before they committed suicide the next day, the kind of conversations they had with their mother, what kind of relationship they had with their loved ones. We think this is the contrast in which we talk about mental illnesses versus illnesses of the body, right? So we think on our side, we want these media discussions that opposition talk about to still exist, but we want them to be void of individual instances of reporting in the life of that single individual. And we think that's the kind of discussion that will be more fruitful on our side. What did opposition want to make this debate about? We think that they were trying to push the alternative, that in the absence of these news agencies and credible information getting out to the public, we are going to have avenues of sources of information that are untruthful and henceforth more dangerous to society. Like, we don't negate the fact that some rumors are going to spread regardless of whether news agencies report on these instances or not. But like the POI from my first speaker, we think it is the principle of whether these news agencies should take up this role of like continuously sensationalizing the life of an individual who took their life and instances of individual reporting. We think although we agree that some rumors may exist under our side, we think the world would be an incredibly better place if these single instances of suicide did not occur. Why do you think discussions under their side, even with truthful news agencies, are going to be much worse off? Because even if your news agency is altruistic, doesn't want to sensationalize it, they still report instances or details of the event. And this news article doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's posted on media, it's posted on Facebook, and the kind of interactions that people have with that news agency is where all the harms accrue. The kind of discussion that happen is sidelined from actual disease of depression or suicidal tendencies. But the kind of discussions that happen are individuals blaming the person who committed suicide. Oftentimes, religious rhetoric takes over. They kind of ask people, did she go to the mosque before this? Did she used to pray religiously? Did her loved ones talk about whether she was a good Muslim or not? These are the kind of discussions that oftentimes hijack the ability for us, for experts to talk about the disease of mental illness and how bad suicidal tendencies can be among vulnerable individuals. Therefore, we think the discussion that gets sidetracked oftentimes happens when you talk about a single individual and your ability to pinpoint characteristics of that individual and therefore say that suicide was as a tendency, suicide is more obvious when you have these kind of lifestyles, when you don't pray, when you don't respect your parents, or when you do several other things, right? Therefore, you are less able to talk about the actual disease, the kind of avenues people have to seek help, and that this is a disease that is irrespective of the kind of lifestyle or the kind of faith that you have. Those are discussions that happen under your side, even with truthful news reporting. Therefore, we think under our side, we are okay with the world we envision is a world in which we have these experts come in, talk about the fact that suicide rates are increasing in Malaysia and vulnerable individuals like the youth, like trans individuals and LGBT individuals are more prone to it, without having to talk about that single individual's life and the relationships they had. We think those are the kind of fruitful discussions that we envision under our side for sure.
Given that there always exist Facebook posts on suicide that are likely to be romanticized and recorded to get the most likes, isn't it important for the mainstream media to offer a counterfactual with experts combating the very same rumors you talk about on your side?
Look, oftentimes these families sometimes step in if these rumors get out of hand. We don't think this debate can happen in a world where it's rumors versus truth. We think in a world which these news agencies are also talking about it, we have the ability to drown out these random posts on Facebook and Twitter. We think in our world, we envision a world in which media takes a responsible way of talking about mental illness as opposed to sensationalizing it, romanticizing it, and talking about the individual as though that individual was the cause of the disease, as opposed to the disease being the cause of that individual committing suicide. Thank you.
The next speaker, Amrit Agastya, is the current best speaker and champion of Malaysian National Championships and the World University's ESL semi-finalist. A student at Nick Taylor's University, she'll be furthering her studies at the Australian National University. To close this debate, opposition whip.
The statistic that suggests the suicide rate in Malaysia is 9.5 deaths for every 100,000 individuals might sound a bit concerning, but it's largely very foreign to most average individuals. If I ask the average person to point to a hall and quantify that number, they probably couldn't, because it's merely a data. But hearing that the boy you went to school with committed suicide, the person you shared classes with and shared afternoons with killed himself, that data is powerful and that data is personal. In the effort of breaking the silence and stigma that surrounds suicide, numbers don't do justice to the individuals behind those numbers and the sufferings that we go through. With respect to that, every time we remain silent is every time we remain complicit in the number of people that continuously opt to end their lives. I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. First, I'm going to talk about why we need these individual stories as opposed to aggregate data. The second, I'll talk about public policy and how we get better discussions on suicide. The first, individual stories. Because unlike data that can be quantified to specific instances, for example, obesity as a result of high cholesterol, suicide isn't like that. Suicide is an individual pursuit that is very unique and tied to circumstances. So you can say that 60 people died because of suicide, but it takes away from the differences and nuances that lead individuals to kill themselves. So every story matters for the fact that suicide is a largely stigmatized issue and an issue that is vast in the triggers that initiate it. So I don't think it's enough for the affirmative team to say that we can have the same discussions, absent the things that make the discussion valuable, which are the things that cause people to end their lives. So I think that's where the discussion lies, and that's where we think their lack of engagement will cause them to lose. Second thing, the discussions in this debate. The first thing I hear in this debate is that it traumatizes those who are suicidal or those with mental health issues. We have a couple of things to say about this. The reason why we got on Facebook and Twitter and bloggers we don't know and we don't care of that are called Hello Kitty 123 is because those people control the media. They're the ones who will spread information on WhatsApp groups, the ones that will end up telling you why people kill themselves, even though they have no reason for that to be true. And our ability to tell fake news from real news is very hard because you can cite random data. You and I probably can't know because we're not experts in this matter. That's why we say the important check in this debate is your media. The media that might be profit-oriented, but is accountable to legal structures that prevent you from defaming people. The fact that you can respond to a family that will be on national television. So yes, they have an incentive to be sensationalized, but that's incomparable to the individuals on the ground who are going to thrive on public thirst for information and speculate. Don't underestimate the Indian uncle who can spam Facebook messages with suicidal individuals. I think that's important. The second is about copycat. People who are committing suicide because they see a correlation or like they relate to the lives of one. The first thing I'll suggest is that's a function of stigma. Every time you can relate to a person that is suicidal, is a result of you not realizing that there are many other steps you can take before you end your life. Seeking out counseling, talking to your parents, going for religious therapy. All these things can make you a better human being, but you don't see that because you relate to another person. The way to break that isn't to not talk about the person who died, is to talk about the person who died and subsequently list out ways in which you can actually benefit or you can actually fix if you have the same problems. So I don't think it's enough for them to say copycat suicide is going to be a thing in our world. We make it better when there actually are discussions that exist. Which brings me to the second part, discussions. They say they're okay with losing empathy. I think they underestimate the power of empathy. Because when you enter newsrooms that are on live channel talking about suicide, you have panels of experts who are best equipped to tell you what circumstances are that you need to assess an individual. Things that you and I don't know, like the lethality assessment, how risky someone is or likely to commit suicide, are things public individuals don't know. And if people don't know this information, how are they going to vote based on this information? Speak to their representatives in parliament to make it a point to have defenders hotlines everywhere, to have therapy sessions in school, to have counselors for everyone to seek out. These things don't exist in the public eye if we don't have the ability to speak about them in nuanced and critical way. But the second thing I'll talk about is stigma. If we don't have genuine media discussion that is national, that is broad, and is public, you allow misconceptions and stigma to exist. The religious pockets that they talk about that don't believe in suicide, don't believe in mental health, they will still exist, but they will exist on misconceptions. Like, for example, if you're schizophrenia or more likely to be violent, there's no actual statistical data to prove that, but it's a misconception that is real, that exists in our criminal justice system. Suicide is illegal in this country for some reason, and all these things build up because we allow people to narrate that story as opposed to individuals who are trained and actually well equipped to make this information important. Therefore, the things like suicide pacts or lovers ending their lives are a function of a world that no longer exists based on data and statistics that are important. Therefore, we think in order to change this culture, yes, we might initially trigger people, but the way we restructure communities makes us better empowered to control ourselves and the people around us who have this discussion. That's the most powerful tool I can give to anybody. And I think robbing people of the opportunity to do that is blatantly unfair to the people who need help the most.
Thank you, opposition. That marks the end of this debate. We now cross the floor and shake hands. Thank you so much for the debate. I love it. I love the debate. Give a round of applause. Very quickly, my colleagues will be setting up the stage for the forum while they do that. Let's not take much attention here. I enjoyed the debate. I truly hope that the forum later could reflect some parts of the discussion. But if you choose not to, that's okay as well. A quick opening remarks for the forum that will be hosted shortly. titled Coming Out of the Dark, It Is Time to Talk About Mental Health, hosted by MIDP and endorsed by Malaysian Mental Health Association. Thank you so much for endorsing. Panelists we have today, Dr. Ang Kim Teng, Associate Professor Dr. Alvin Ng Lai Un, Dr. Nur Ashikin Ibrahim, and Vizla Kumarasan, will be moderated by Amelia Sharif, Chief Executive Editor of the G Blog. A quick opening remarks, introduction of the forum. 4 out of every 10 Malaysians will fall victim to some form of mental health issue in the course of their lives, and psychologists believe that the numbers will continue to rise. According to International Medical University, consultant psychiatrist and addiction medicine specialist Dr. Philip George. He said that numbers are often downplayed due to the stigma that surrounds the condition. Mental health issues in Malaysia are still largely regarded as taboo, and that can lead to terrible consequences. People are confused about what constitutes a mental health issue. They don't know where to seek for help or advice, and that questions surrounding mental health all too often go unanswered. By 2020, mental health is expected to be the second biggest health problem in Malaysia, just behind heart disease. What can we do to combat this situation? How do we help the affected? Perfect timing. Let's invite the panelists and moderator up on stage, and I'll pass the mic to the moderator. Let's give them a huge round of applause.
Hello. Hi, I hope that everyone is excited for the forum. My name is Amelia Sharif. I'll be moderating the panel today. You can call me M. So just a bit of briefing how this will work. We'll have a discussion here. And then after that discussion, we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions or clarifications that you want to ask with regards to the discussion, just that will happen. You can keep them at the end of the forum, and I'm sure that the panelists will be more than happy to address the concerns that you have. Without further ado, we will start the discussion, and I would like to give some opening remarks about this. Mental illness doesn't just look like the homeless and sloppy person talking to himself on the street. Mental illness looks like the high-functioning young adult with a successful corporate career who couldn't go to sleep at night and couldn't get out of bed in the morning. Mental illness looks like a lonely and distressed single mother working 3 jobs to raise her 2 young children. Mental illness looks like the Insta-famous public figure who cuts herself with a penknife because that physical pain is so much easier to endure than the pain that she feels in her heart. Mental illness looks like a middle-aged man who takes comfort in alcohol and recreational drugs because the reality of his family's death is too hard to deal with. According to the latest National Health and Morbidity Survey, every 3 in 10 adults aged 16 years and above in Malaysia suffer from some form of mental health issues. And by 2020, mental illness is expected to be the second biggest health problems affecting Malaysians just after heart problem. These speak volume of the importance of today's discussion. So we were not just going to talk about mental illness, what these are, and how do we detect them, but we'll also talk about breaking that taboo, and we'll also talk about how do you help yourself even if you feel like you have mental illness or some form of depression, because a lot of the times we aren't sure if we actually have some kind of problems. And together with me today, we'll discuss the issue of 4 extremely experienced and amazing individuals. So I will introduce them one by one, and we'll start with Dr. Ang Kim Teng. As a strong proponent on issues related to mental health, Dr. Ang has dedicated her life to create awareness and fight for the provision of accessible supportive services on mental well-being in Malaysia. Dr. Ang started her career as a medical doctor and public health specialist with the Ministry of Health from 1977 to 2014. She was appointed as a Selangor State Health Director and became a member of the Mental Health Promotion Advisory Council with the Ministry of Health. With a wide experience in hospital and health services management, Dr. Ang's contribution goes beyond treating sick patients. Dr. Ang is also actively involved in the research and development of policies related to mental health in Malaysia, as well as play an advisory role to a number of mental health organizations, which includes her appointment as the chairman of the Board of Visitors, Psychiatry of Hospital Kuala Lumpur, as well as the management committee of the Malaysian Mental Health Association. So welcome, Dr. Ang. On my far left is Dr. Nur Ashikin Ibrahim. She's the head of Mental Health Unit with the Ministry of Health, also known as Dr. N. That's what she would like to be referred to as. Dr. N has been actively involved in mental health issues and advocacy for the past 15 years. As a focal point of the ASEAN Mental Health Task Force, she's very much involved in training on mental health for healthcare providers and also other government and non-government agencies. Dr. N has received various certifications under the mental health services in disaster in Japan, in Australia, and also a few other countries. Dr. N started her career as a doctor in University Hospital Sungai Buloh. Now she is a public health specialist and senior principal assistant director in the Mental Health Unit Disease Control Division with the Ministry of Health. With her wide years of experience, Dr. N has conducted and coordinated various awareness campaigns and training, not just in Malaysia, but also across ASEAN, to help bring this important issue to the forefront. So welcome on board, Dr. N. To my right is Vizla Kumarasan. Vizla is a director at Mindwork Psychology and Counseling Center. Vizla described herself as a clinical psychologist running an LGBTIQ+ affirmative practice. From the time she returned to Malaysia after studying abroad, Vizla has been working with local NGOs and marginalized communities such as refugees, transgenders, homosexuals, and those who suffer from mental illness. Passionate and intelligent, Vizla carries out her work diligently in accordance with feminist principles by practicing democratic ideals as well as with utmost respect for human rights. Vizla said that marginalized groups of people have come to accept that disrespect and violence is a fact of life through everyday interactions with people, right up to the way they are treated by public institutions. Vizla expressed hope that more people will come to understand the needs of these individuals and see that they are no different from anyone else. So we're very happy to have Vizla with us today. Last but not least, Associate Professor Dr. Elvin Ng. Dr. Elvin is a clinical psychologist and Vice President of the Malaysian Society of Clinical Psychology. Dr. Elvin obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of Western Australia, a Bachelor of Psychology, and a Doctor of Psychology Clinical from Murdoch University. He is currently head of the Department of Psychology at Sunway University. Previously, he was attached with University Kebangsaan Malaysia for 11 years as a lecturer and practitioner in clinical psychology. He is also currently an adjunct senior lecturer at Monash University, Malaysia, and an honorary senior lecturer at the University of East Anglia. Dr. Ng's research areas are mental health, literacy, positive psychology, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, psychometric measurements for mental health, and cross-cultural factors in psychotherapy. I have no idea what I just said. He was also a regular consultant on the Live Breakfast Mental Health Hour on Live FM every Wednesday morning. Dr. has given numerous talks and workshops to organizations, conferences, and the public on mental health topic. He recently won the 2017 EduCube National Outstanding Educator in Psychology Award in recognition of his contributions towards the development of psychology in Malaysia. Dr. Ng was instrumental in establishing Malaysian Society in Clinical Psychology in 2010, and he was also the founding president and currently the vice president. So welcome on board, Dr. Ng. Before I start, or just to give you a bit of an overview of what they're currently working on, so that you can also have, like some kind of understanding of the kind of projects are currently in on this topic. I would like to ask the panelists to share with us a little bit about the things that they are working on. Maybe we'll start with Dr. Anne. Very good morning. Assalamualaikum. Salam sejahtera to everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Anne, as you know, and I represent basically the Ministry of Health, the government sector that I'm under the Disease Control Division. So basically, the projects that we have actually are related to those creating awareness and promoting awareness, not just on mental health, but juga on the campaign, Healthy Lifestyle campaign. And one of the things that we're working on for the mental health unit is actually the mental health literacy project, which is coming soon. And also, we are developing our national strategic and mental health action plan for Malaysia. So I think even those of you who are interested to actually promote your ideas or actually put in your ideas into the plan, you're most welcome. We have in implementation the National Strategic Action Plan for Suicide Prevention, and we are reviewing it hopefully soon. There's so many things, and the other things that we're working on is the humanitarian services in terms of the psychological first aid. So what we do is actually to train the NGOs on actually basically on psychological first aid and mental health preparedness. There are many other things, but you can always contact me as a focal point of Ministry of Health if you're interested to be involved. And I think we welcome, because now we are opening to the youth, to actually give the ideas, and we are also approaching Ministry of Women and also Ministry of Youth and Sports, so that we can actually advocate mental health awareness. And I think one of the most recent things, if you have not heard, is the Healthy Mind program in school, which we embarked with the Ministry of Education since 2011, whereby now we have about 2,343 schools implementing. And I'm not sure whether Taylor was involved, but last year we worked with one of the NGOs called My Printies to actually promote mental health awareness in the youth. So those are among the things that we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anne.
And very good morning to all of you. Well, the Malaysian Mental Health Association, we are not as famous as Befrienders. I don't know how many of you are aware that we exist. Actually, we are already 50 years old this year. Okay. Now, we started off as a support for people with mental illness, especially those who have been discharged from the hospital, to give them support. That was how it was started. But since then, we have expanded into public education, caregiver education and support, advocacy, and we are very actively involved in this education. Okay, like caregivers education, we have a 12-module, 3.5 days program over 3 weekends, 4 times a year, and we have also got another 2-day intensive course for the public. Okay, and it's 8 modules and 4 times a year, and we are actually in the midst of acquiring a license for the mental health first aid program from Australia. This is a patented program, and we are getting the license for it, and hopefully by next year it will roll out. So we are in a way trying to promote mental health literacy and to bring greater awareness on the mental health issues which are relevant to all of us. Now, a lot of people are very scared. They talk about mental health or mental disorders. They say, I'm okay, it's not relevant to me. But I think we all need to know, because you will never know. It's not just for us, but we have to be in a position to be able to help others. People you're in contact with, as a student, your friend, in your family, and in future when you're working. Because there are lots of people with mental health issues. As Amelia has just stated, it's not those that you see on the street. They are ordinary people, and you may not be aware, but you have to be sensitive, and you have to know what it is and recognize them, and to be of help. Because
someday somebody will need help and you should be in a position to help. Now, we are actually, going to organize a very big program in conjunction with World Mental Health Day. That's on the 6th of October. It's going to be an evening program run, a My Run project and carnival, which we are finalizing the place, so I can't tell you now, but watch out for this event, and we hope you can come with us because we want the young people who are the people who can make changes, and especially using social media. Okay, and we hope that you'll join us and you'll follow us in our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ang. Now, Wisla, you want to share a little bit about what you do?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am actually in private practice, and I'm based in a private hospital in Subang, in PJ area. But apart from that, I'm also very involved in a lot of civil society movements, particularly with regards to destigmatizing healthcare, specifically mental health care for marginalized communities. Primarily, my work is at the moment is with LGBT communities, but also working to ensure that there is equal access to healthcare for other sections of society that is marginalized in Malaysia. For example, non-citizens, whether they are stateless children, stateless people, refugees, asylum seekers. That's pretty much. I mean, yeah, I feel like not much compared to the others, but that's pretty much the areas of work my interest.
Wisla is just being humble, you guys. But yes, Dr. Elvin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just a regular lecturer, teaching, marking more papers. In terms of what I'm interested in, I actually study mental health literacy. I'm trying to find out how much we all know about mental illness and mental health. Perhaps we can all work together. Since you are doing campaigns, we can find out whether how much we work. Part of my interest is in that because in my years of practicing as a clinical psychologist, I've also wondered how much we actually know about what mental health, mental illnesses are. And before we can even approach help people, I guess, in the country, we need to know how much we know, so that we can just simply impose. The kind of models we use in treatment, in addressing mental health in Malaysia is very much a westernized model. And I find that one of the main problems we all have, the main issue is that we don't have any kind of research, or maybe we have, but not enough, to find out who we are as Malaysians. What's our indigenous psychology? We can study cross-cultural psychology, but we don't necessarily know who we are. And that's one of the things that made me go back to university to do all the research. I no longer practice, so some people in the clinical area still scold me for not being in practice because we don't have enough psychologists in Malaysia. But I see myself as an educator to educate the younger ones, to be more prepared to go into the health work. So that's basically what I do. Other things I'm interested in is what we have read up just now. I'm no longer on air because I go to sleep. Otherwise, I have to wake up super early in the morning every Wednesday morning to go to the studio and do pre-recording.
Such a chore to be famous. Such a chore to be famous.
Yeah, it's a curse. I tell you, it's a curse. So my passion is teaching and also to share whatever I know with younger ones so that you all can address the problems of the future and you are the future. So yeah.
I think to kickstart the discussion, I'm going to ask Dr. Alvin to educate all of us. So what is mental illness actually? What are the common forms of mental illness in Malaysia?
Right. I guess I would want to simplify mental illness to the point of how we understand physical illness. Because, for example, if you get sick, physically sick, what do? You you go and see the doctor for some medication, then go home and you normally are told to rest and drink lots of water, isn't it? Yeah. And no stigma, like you get sick, someone goes to the doctor, okay, that's cool. And you tell someone you're sick and everyone gives you their remedy. And even before you get sick, for example, you feel like your throat is sore, you do something about it, right? Yeah. And I would say, you know, the reason why you do that is so that you are able to function the way you normally function in daily life. To be able to just, get up, go to work, or go to classes with your students, come back, you're able to study because you're able to concentrate. If you're sick, when you have a flu, you have difficulty concentrating. That prevents you from functioning the way you normally function in daily life. That's physical health, physical illness. Mental health will be the same thing. What is mental illness? It's basically a disorder of sort that prevents you from functioning in your day-to-day lives. As simple as that. But what prevents you mentally? The way you think. For example, if you worry too much to the point you're not able to concentrate on your job or on your studies, that's in a way a mental illness. But we only call it an illness if it sustains for a certain time. Because we all go through those kind of mental troubles, all of us do. But some of us go through it a bit longer than usual. That can be termed as a disorder. Just like how if you have the sniffles, it's just for 5 minutes, no worries. Hachu here, hachu there, fine. But you hachu and you sneeze like crazy for like 2 days, that's illness. So mental illness is essentially not being able to function for a significant amount of time mentally. Cognitively, you're not able to concentrate, you're feeling terrible, you have difficulties feeling pleasure, for example, and that becomes something that we call depression. One of the telltale signs of depression is you stop being able to feel pleasure. Stuff that you are usually able to enjoy, you no longer enjoy. And many of us go through that. I go through that. The WHO says that 1 in 5 people at any one time has got a mental disorder. 1, 2, 3, 4, pain. I mean, but for today, tomorrow maybe this was 1 in 3. There's a 1, 2, 3. Stigma.
I don't think I've heard a more simplified and easier to understand definition of mental health. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Alvin. Dr. Ann, you want to share with us a bit, maybe in terms of like the facts and statistics in Malaysia, what are the more common forms of mental illness in Malaysia?
Okay, thank you, Ann. I think a little bit to add to what Dr. Alvin has said, because you asked about the definition of mental illness, but probably a lot of people will ask also, what is mental health? Because mental health has a little bit of different definition, because according to WHO, it's actually a situation whereby you know your potentials, you can cope with the normal stresses of life every day, you can work productively, and you can contribute to the society. So when people ask us sometimes, how do you differentiate between mental health and mental illness? At the verge of when you actually have, when you talk about mental well-being, so that particular situation, if it is imbalanced and you go towards the negative aspect, you will go into that verge of having mental disorder or mental illness. Having said that, I think when you talk about the statistics, a lot of people semua tanya pasal statistics. It's always about statistics. I mean, you want to do projects, you need to have facts, on how big is the problem. I always tell, especially my colleagues, when I express my what do you call it, not to say my despair about the cost or even the peruntukan that they actually put into mental health program. Mental health is here, but most of the time priority is down there. Please do not expose me. And because I'm from the Ministry of Health, so basically when you talk about mental health issues, recently the National Health and Mobility Survey conducted every 5 years by the Ministry of Health revealed that 29.2% of individuals above 16 years old have actually some form of mental health issues. That means accounting to 1 in 3. But people are afraid, so 1 in 3, that means 1 out of 3 of you all have some form of mental health issues, and they put it as 3 out of 10. But this figure has actually came up it's like a 3-fold increase if you look at in the year 1996.
whereby the prevalence is only about 10.6%. And when you look at the year 2006, it's only about 11.2%, but it increased markedly over the past 30 years. And that's a little bit alarming when actually my previous minister actually was a little bit hesitant to actually announce the statistics, because Datin Am sits in our Mental Health Promotion Advisory Council Board. So it was very difficult to get us. Just to share with you, the other interesting statistics that we got is actually recently we had a national adolescent study in the year 2017, and we found that the prevalence of depression among those 13 to 17 years old using the depression anxiety stress scale, that means it is not a disease base, it's just screening. The prevalence of symptoms of depression is actually 18.3%, which is actually a little bit what, wow, you know, there's so many people who are having depressive symptoms. And when you talk about suicide, the prevalence of suicidal behavior is also increasing, and it's probably from 7.9% in the year 2012, it increases, suicidal ideation increases to about 10%. So whether it's because people are more aware of mental illness and mental health, so people are coming forward and people do not have that stigma to think, actually, yes, I do have sleeping problems, yes, I do have sadness, and yes, I do have ideas of actually killing myself, you know. So that actually increases the statistics. But when you look at it, and the rest of the panel, probably I personally think that lately, offhand, mental health awareness is increasing. People are talking about it. People are talking about it in Facebook, in Twitter. Tetapi the system itself needs to be ready. So the system itself at this point of time is not ready. Every time when people ask me, where do I go when I have mental health issues, I feel like I want to kill myself now. I got a message, a text on Eve of Hari Raya saying that, salam dok, I feel like saya rasa saya nak mati, saya dah penat. How do you answer to that? You know, from an anonymous person yang actually got my handphone from somewhere. So it's a little bit alarming, and I'm a little bit how do we help them? That's one of the things. So our system needs to be ready. That's the statistics that is in Malaysia, and that's comparable to other countries. Macam tadi when I heard the motion of the debate, yes, they were saying that about 9.5, about 9 adults over 100,000 people actually have this suicidal behavior, having suicide intentions or even suicidal actions. But then, of course, when you put that figure up to our probably our politicians or something, it's a little bit difficult for them to comprehend. It's 9 orang ke satu hari dekat Malaysia ni bunuh diri, tak dengar pun, you know. So those are the things that, because you need figures to actually do programs. And if you do not have to, you cannot come up with a very prominent figure. Sometimes we feel that it's not important.
Dr. Ann, before we talk about the structures and the support system, I want to ask Dr. Ang about something that Dr. Ann said. So more children or younger individuals are now having the awareness to say that maybe I have some form of mental illness. What are the factors that would contribute to mental illness? Does genetics have any like factor in it, or is it just like the surrounding circumstances? Like what is it exactly? If my parents are depressed, does this mean that I have a higher likelihood to be depressed?
Thank you. Trying to think how I'm going to present this without giving you a lecture. Now, anyway, genetics they do play a role, but I must remind you that genetics, for every chronic illness, hypertension, diabetes, or even now cancers, there is some genetic component. So it's not just for the mental illness. Genetics is just one part of it, and that is related to what we call that. When we look at the causation, we say it's biopsychosocial, the biological part of it, which is actually the brain, our body, and that is related to chemicals in the brain, the neurotransmitters, and that again is related to our physiology, the function of the engines. Our body has got different engines, different parts, even the brain. Managing those chemicals, make sure that they are all in perfect unison from production to their transmission and so on and so forth. It is governed by those machines up in the brain, and those machines, like they inherit our physical characteristics, we also inherit our functional at the engine level. Okay, so all of us has got that, and therefore there is some the heritable genetic factor. But besides that, there are also other factors. The psychological makeup of the person, which I am sure Lisa will be able to explain further, Dr. Alvin. And your mental resilience and how you cope with the different stresses. Like young children, there are a lot of things that they are trying to cope with, especially nowadays in this modern world. Peer pressure, social media, and growing up, the hormonal changes. And then there's the other part of it, the social part of it, there's the environment. And fourthly, the spiritual part of it, and that is actually very, very important. How the spiritual factor can be affected. So there are multifactorial and genetics, and it's just one of them.
All right, I want to direct this question to Wisla then. So we all have this idea of someone who has a mental illness would be someone who's probably like non-functioning. This person could be like sloppy, doesn't go out of his or her room all the time. There's a lot of misconceptions surrounding mental illness, and this contributes to a lot of the reasons why when sometimes you feel like, I think I'm depressed, but I can't be, because the picture that we have in our heads of someone having mental illness doesn't fit the way we look at ourselves. So I want Lisa to maybe share a little bit based on your practice, maybe some stories or cases that you have handled that debunk some of these misconceptions.
So most of my clients, all of my patients are from middle class, upper middle class Malaysian society, and all of them hold stable jobs. All of them have respectable positions in society. They have high positions in the organizations they work in. But still, they do suffer from some kind of mental health distress. So I think the average person who suffers with mental illness are people who look like you and me, right? There are people with education. There are people who are able to function every day, okay? But then, of course, there's also that section of society that fit into that profile that we assume people with mental illnesses have, the ones who are unkempt, the ones who can't look after themselves. So that also depends on the level of how much the functioning has been affected, all right? So the assumption is that the more severe the illness, the worse the functioning is affected. That is the general assumption, right? But now, more and more, we're becoming aware of such a thing called functional depression. People who are highly functioning, people who give the impression that they have it all together, but are silently, quietly suffering from mental illness, right? And the most common forms of mental illness among them are depression and anxiety disorders. And then, of course, there is the typical stereotype of mental illness, the ones with the most severe forms of mental illness, the schizophrenias, bipolar depression. And these are the ones who we think are the ones, they fit the stereotype now. They talk to themselves, they're roaming the streets. I sometimes go to brickfields and there is this person who's always there and he's walking around with a bottle of alcohol, he's talking to himself, he's got no shoes on, and he looks really dirty. People think that is mental illness. That's just one type of mental illness that is also compounded by things like, how did this man end up in the street? Were his family able to look after him? Were his family even able to afford medication? Do they know that he could be treated? Right? And one thing that we assume we should do with people with mental illness is put them in institutions, right? And that's also very far from the truth, right? There are different approaches to mental health treatment. There's different approaches to rehabilitation, but the ones that are the most effective are ones where people with mental illnesses are able to function in society and in communities. Right? So I don't know if that's answered the question, but these are the different facets, right? We say mental illness exists on a spectrum, right? And people can look very different along that spectrum as well. And it can also, mental illness can express itself very differently along that spectrum as well.
To follow up on that question, maybe I want to ask Dr. Elvin this question. So there are various ways for us to help someone who is suffering from some form of mental illness. And a lot of the times we hear this advice that people always say, like, oh, you're suffering from mental illness, maybe it's a punishment by God. You're suffering from mental illness, maybe you're not pious enough, maybe you don't pray 5 times a day, you don't go to temple, you miss your Sunday prayers maybe. So I've always been curious to know, like, is that true? Like, can the spiritual aspect help someone with mental illness, and does like putting someone in religious camps, for example, can help them deal with that issues? Is that one of the ways that can help someone with mental illness?
Right. In terms of spiritual aspects of mental well-being, definitely it's there. Otherwise, you wouldn't have people going for religion. Religion means a lot of things to a lot of people, but at the same time, it can also be use it in a way that is kind. Because I like this phrase that says, you feel kindness, you don't feel religion. Does it make sense? What you feel is kindness. And the thing is, the religion can be a very good vehicle to bring about kindness. Because the reason why we are attracted to religion is because it's meant for fellowship, relationship. And if you look at any kind of relationship that's meaningful and good, it actually facilitates wellness in anyone. When you want to go out with any friends, who would you look for? The ones that you like. Sure, right? The ones who get cheerful enough. And you have a relationship. If you had a fight with anyone this morning, it's likely to spoil your whole day. Relationship. Yeah. So, yeah, when you look into religion or any kind of religious activities, normally it brings people together, you got fellowship, that's wellness. Yeah. Relationship also gives you security, that's wellness. And with that kind of security, you feel safe. When you feel safe, it's easier to then feel peace. Peace is also to be felt, not to be found. Go around looking for peace, you can't feel peace. So, if you look into aspects of religion that brings all those kinds of things up, it's very helpful. For example, even like prayer. Prayer is meant to be a strengthening of your relationship with God, for example. Yeah, and that's relationship. If you feel at peace when you pray, then prayer is working very well for you. But if you feel as though you are compelled to pray, I had a client once who had to pray not just 5 times a day, but more than that, because he was a rascal before. And, his earlier life, he wants to make up for it. Prays like 100 times a day. So imagine you wudu for 100 times a day. Wow, how clean you become, but even not clean enough for him. It becomes dysfunction. So you need to understand what brings function and what brings dysfunction, regardless of what method you use. So religion is one of them.
Yeah, and Dr. Ang has something to add.
Actually, I have, been asked this question many times, and I have been asked to speak in church. And so this question about the spiritual part of it, how is that connected to mental illness? Now, I try to analyze and try to understand myself and connect the spiritual and the physical and the biological. Okay, And in trying to understand, now I come to this, the brain, we have got the voluntary and the involuntary. Now there is one part of our brain that the autonomic nervous system. Now you have got one system in the brain that controls many parts of our body, secretions of the various chemicals, your saliva, your digestive juices, your heart rate, and all these things are involuntary. They are controlled by that part of the brain, which is very sensitive to emotions and your the state of your mind. Now, spirituality, that is your belief system, your the inner system, and that itself can influence the functioning of that part of the brain. Like for example, guilt, sin. Let's say a person who's very religious and commits adultery, and he's full of remorse and guilt. Now that is a stress factor, and this is going to affect that autonomic system, and that in turn is going to affect the secretion of all these various chemicals. So in a way, the mind, the body, and the spirit, they're all interconnected. So it has a causation, you can explain it that way. Now, it can also be a remedy in the sense that, prayer, okay, and harnessing the power of God, and that belief system. Now, that is also going to give you a calming effect, an effect that, that mechanism, the autonomic nervous system, and it can, enhance the secretions of, various chemicals. So there is a part in spiritual aspect in terms of causation and also in terms of remedy.
Wisla has something to add as well.
I think when people advocate for prayer, it's not something that's prayer alone is going to help cure things. It's prayer in combination with treatment. And treatment is one that is prescribed by a health professional or mental health professional. And the other thing also to remember when it comes to the power of believing in something, spirituality is not just the belief of God. Spirituality is more than that. You don't have to believe in God to be spiritual. And one thing that a belief in something larger can help with regards to giving good mental health is hope, right? And I think with a lot of mental illness, there's a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. People with mental health feel that, and a sustained feeling of hopelessness and helplessness can also lead to mental health distress. So a way in which spirituality can help as a protective factor against mental health vulnerabilities is this feeling of hope and a sense that you're not that helpless, that strength can be found some way, somehow. It's belief in that.
Dr. N. I think when Mr. was saying about hope, one of the things I think we need to also focus on is basically when you talk about positive thinking, because it's very important that actually when you talk, some of the causes that they were saying, a lot of related to biological, and then we have other things. But one of the things among the studies that we did found actually among the school children, the youth, found out that among the causes of depression, that is the factors contributing, is actually the expectation within oneself. So their own expectation of how they expect people to perceive them, what they actually want people to see them, And the mental health resilience is one of the important things, because at any point of time in life, we would probably be facing some form of crisis. And some people have very low stress level, low coping skill, that's okay. Some people have very high stress level, high coping skill, that is still okay, hopefully. But if you have low coping skill and very high stress level at one point of time, you will get burnt out. So sometimes people get mental health issues because suddenly, that's why when we are in school, we are being given, for example, the youth, when they go to the university, they cannot cope with certain culture changes, certain changes in their lives, and things like they have to adapt. And that is the point of time where it challenges your coping mechanism. So basically, I think you've also got to learn besides being the spiritual aspect. Yes, it is important, the coping skills, but also you've got to learn the aspects of how do you deal with a problem, how do you actually the positive thinking, because positive thinking does not guarantee things, but it gives you a lot of hope.
Thank you, Dr. Anne. I want to talk more about mental health resilience, but before that, let's recap a little bit about this question of spirituality and religion. So from the input that we've gotten so far, so it seems like religion works because the spiritual aspect does play a factor in your mental health, that you feel on a daily basis. So it could be in the form of like religion, it could be in the form of hope, it could also be in the form of like positive thinking. So whichever works for you, as long as it takes you out of a space of hopelessness, helplessness, and also provide you with that support structure and the relationships that Dr. Alvin talked about earlier. So I want to move this discussion to mental health resilience about children and vulnerable communities largely. So, and we look at like schools these days, when I was going to school, my counseling unit does nothing more than telling me which career path that I was supposed to take. So, Dr. Anne, can you talk a little bit about counseling in schools these days? Is it a conducive environment for children these days? What are the kind of policies or changes that the ministry is doing to help children in school realize that they may have some kind of issues, and how do they deal with it? Can you share a little bit about that?
Okay, maybe about the policies, because it involves Ministry of Education. I cannot actually speak on their behalf. But basically, in school at this point of time, I think everyone needs to know that you have what they call as a school teacher counselor, or in Malay they call it as guru bimbingan dan counseling. And Ministry of Education has actually given, for example, like 1 to 500 students. So if you have, for example, because I come from Kota Kemuning, so in Kota Kemuning, the secondary schools they have about 3,000 students. So they have probably about 6 to 7 counselors, and these counselors, they don't have a lesson to teach. Actually, they tak ada subject yang diajar. They're actually doing counseling. Basically, counseling from what you say when you were in school, counseling about career. Tapi I think I'm older than that. Probably I can't remember having to see any counselors when I had problems in school. So I'm like the remaja purba like that, So, okay, all right. So basically now, they have a lot of psychometric tests in school. That's what the teachers are doing. And when we embark into the program of what we call as Healthy Mind program in school, we get these students, secondary students. We do not concentrate on the primary because primary are very young at age. The secondary students, they have to undergo through this screening. But we use the simple screening method, what we call as the depression, anxiety, stress scales, just to know what are their levels of stress, what are their levels of anxiety and depression. And yes, we found that quite a number, that means more than, initially we found that more than 40% had some mental health issues, had some form of depressive, that means depression pada kadar yang teruk. So, but this is, as you said, what is happening in school now, because when somebody is being detected, the children are being detected, they are actually referred to the counselors. But what is happening is that if the counselors are doing counseling, and they found that these particular students need to be referred further, probably to a psychiatrist or probably to you or whoever, when you tell the parents, that's where the barrier comes. Because I think at that point of time, katakanlah you all sebagai anak-anak, you do want to see, you're probably a Form 4 or a Form 5 student who actually underwent the screening and found out that, yes, I do have some mental health issues and I do have depression in terms of symptoms. So we need to actually, whether it's a clinical, now we're talking about functional, so they don't come to school, they don't do their homework, they get scolded by teachers, without knowing that there's so many things happening at home because problemnya mungkin di rumah, So then when you are referred, there is that barrier there because you need to get parents' permission because you're under 18.
So siapa-siapa yang kat sini above 21, 22, 18 and above, there's no problems. But for those under 18 years old, you need to get parents' permission. And if the problems are coming at home, from home, parents, you think parents want to actually allow their children to be referred? That's one of the barriers that Ministry of Health Education is facing. And at the same time, we've had like boarding schools, you need high academic. Everybody's talking about, sorry lah, Ministry of Education tak ada sini kan? Ada. Okay, tak apa. Because I always tell, maybe you see why Dr. Mazli, because we're talking about academic, dah ada A, dia ada perlu A+. So you just, so you just imagine, you get good results. You get 9 A's and probably 8 A's and 1 B+. 8 A+ and 1 B+. That's not good enough. Even if your parents tell you that it's good, katakanlah parents tu bagus, they have good mental health, it's okay A or it's okay M, you did well. But to M, because my peers got 9 A+. I'm the only person who doesn't get 9 A+. I dapat 8 A+ and B+. That's really distressing for M. It can be. So it's basically your expectation and your peers' expectation. So there's a lot of multiple factors. Our education system needs to actually, because when I talk, I do have a lot of passion when I'm talking about mental health. Sorry, macam nampak macam nak marah je kan? Okay, because I think that mental health awareness or even our how do you address mental health issues in countries, it must go beyond treatment. It must go beyond Ministry of Health. It's just not about Ministry of Health alone you're talking about. Because bila orang cakap pasal mental health, dia akan tengok mental illness yang dah teruk, yang dah the ones who have problems with probably CLV, but the ones who are actually having functional depression, and keeping to yourself and you've got to perform. These are the ones yang are not addressing them, and it goes beyond. For example, you keluar daripada university tailors, you don't have work. Okay, there's no work. And then you expect the bayaran saraan sahajalah, saraan sehari hidup sahaja, you get mental health issues because you need to pay. Of course, for those yang pakai tudung, tiap minggu nak beli tudung kan. So I'm not joking. These are the things yang you need to actually portray yourself to a certain extent, and you get depressed and you get upset for not being able to get a demand that you want. For those young, possibly even it goes beyond not just not having work, but also financial issues, and then even to put up with a certain standard in your life, to certain expectations in universities, because you need to get that dean's list, for example. So I think our expectation must also go down. So we must also teach our students about resilience. That means, macam mana you nak bangkit daripada kekalahan. The moment, for example, a person taking medicine and they have to wait like 8 months before getting to work. During my time, I only waited for about less than a month. Tiba-tiba dia dah kena posting dekat UH, and then I got posted to Hospital Sungai Buloh, where you deal with leprosy patients, HIV patients, kan? At that point of time, you do on calls, kan? So now, what is happening to our society? Is it our resilience is actually having problems? Or is it the way that we speak to patients? Because we think that, for example, when a person is actually having mental issues, they say that you're weak. Yeah,
Dr. just a quick question I want to ask. These guru bimbingan dan counseling, are they trained mental illness?
Okay. They do not have proper training macam psychologists, but there are some, I think majority are actually registered counselors. Okay,
what does that mean? Registered counselors?
Registered counselors, they are registered in terms of practicing, in terms of memberi counselling under the Counsellors Act. After I can remember, after 550, they are actually able to do counselling.
So there's some form of certification.
Yes, but in our system, the Ministry of Health actually work with the counsellors to actually get our counsellors who are actually counsellors in our Ministry of Health to train them. So they have about like 10 modules on resilience to actually teach these particular students. Some form or other, a lot of things are going around to do. For example, I just want to let you know, for example, even in the Standard 4 Pendidikan Kesihatan book, they have, for example, like values and how to manage stress. They do to a certain extent. Tetapi apabila
whenever they step out of school, I think it has to increase. The resilience has to increase. So because we have problems, sad to say, with our husbands, a lot of people are talking about it, and because of that, banyak macam you pukul rata. Just because one husband has problem, you say that all husbands are having.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because Alvin and Lisa has something to add. We'll start with Alvin.
Just a quick one. I'm happy that Dr. Ann talked about the system instead, because when we talk about school, if many of our children are having mental health issues, and what are we teaching them? So, and perhaps it's a system that is not helping out, because I want to just highlight that, if we say that 1 in 5 people at any one time has a mental illness, we tend to focus on this one. We forget that at least 2 in 5 live with this 1 in 5. It's 3 in 5 work with this 1 in 5. It's 4 in 5 is neighbors with this 1 in 5. All 3 of them are stressed out because of this 1 in 5. And yet we still focus on this person. We say this person has to go and see the professional or whoever. But if you don't empower these 3 people here, what do? They have to see these poor psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists over here and get bam, You are burnt out too here. We're all burnt out people. See our faces? It's functional depression.
So you're saying a lot of the actions now are responsive rather than educating people.
Correct. So we need to somehow change the system. I prefer to see more empowerment in the system. I'm glad you all are here because you are the ones who are going to be the 2, 3, 4, 5 in 5, maybe even 6 in 5, you can count correctly. That we need to all be empowered, because we think about cure. Only doctors can cure. How many doctors are there? Not enough, right? But can we all care? We all can care. So if we can empower all of us, empower the whole community to help out, then it's not just that one person who is being stigmatized, because there won't be any more stigma. And this is all idealistic.
Yes, Visa.
So I'm glad we started talking about the system, right? Oftentimes, mental illness is seen as personal factors, and it's seen as due to personal weakness. But I think what the discussion started, that it isn't, right? It's these social factors. It's our laws, our policies, our social structures that contribute to people's well-being, right? And if you want to have good mental health, you also have to have good social structures and systems in place. So that's why we also, aside from advocating for access to mental health care, access, making sure it's a system that empowers, it also has to be a system that protects and respects human beings as individuals and societies and communities. So that's also essential when we're talking about good mental health and also well-being.
That flows nicely to the next question that I want to ask Isla. In Malaysia, there's a trend to, there's a stigma, more like, on people like, for example, transsexual or transgenders who are seen as people who suffer from mental illness in some ways. Can you elaborate on that? Is transgender or having a different, having a sexuality that is out of the binaries, for example, a form of mental illness?
So transgenderism, same-sex attraction, they have a terrible history with mental health. They come from a history of being persecuted, but mental health was used as a system to persecute and to punish and to so-called treat, this section of the community. But with time and with understanding and with actual studying of sexualities and human behavior and just human attraction and things like that, we've come to understand that sexuality is diverse. Gender identity is diverse. Gender expression and sexual orientation, they're all very, very diverse. We've come to accept that there's no normal when it comes to gender, sexuality, and identity, but there are norms. And we know that it is the norm, right? More people are heterosexual, more people are cisgender compared to transgender or have same-sex attraction or have bisexuality. So there is now this shift in the way we mental health and other sectors of health view sexuality and gender expression and identity. So, but it's because of, maybe because of its history, right? And maybe because also of a lack of understanding And it's also human nature to want people to conform, that we tend to still view anything that's not cisgender, anything that's not heterosexual as deviant, right? Anything that's not cisgender, anything that's not heterosexual as a problem, right? So that is still something that is an attitude and a societal sort of situation that we live with. Transgender is no longer viewed as a mental illness, right? Even the term gender identity disorder no longer exists in the mental health language. We're now moving to a discussion of it's now called gender dysphoria, and that it does not refer to the situation of being transgender. Instead, it refers to the distress that people who are transgender experience when they are forced to remain as they are, how they are assigned sex. So it's a very specific term referring to that distress, and it's often misunderstood, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, to continue to malign and to marginalize the community.
So just to recap that a little bit, so the recognition by the mental health community around the world right now on gender dysphoria is not a recognition that being a transgender is a mental illness, but rather because you're a transgender and society treats you in such a negative way, therefore this term refers to the distress that you feel because of the way society treats you rather than the thing that you are facing.
Absolutely. And also there's a recognition, and ICD lately removed gender dysphoria, the new ICD, right?
It's now called gender incongruence.
Yes. All right. And the diagnosis is very clear. It's not because you're diagnosing someone as mentally ill. The diagnosis is required to enable the person to access medical treatment that will allow them to transition. So for trans people, transitioning is a very important element in the treatment of gender dysphoria. So the diagnosis is specifically to allow access to treatment and to endocrine treatment, hormone therapy, surgery, whatever that's necessary for them to transition. So that is how the medical fraternity, the mental health fraternity, is looking at sexual identity and expression.
Right. I read somewhere that previously, like a long time ago, Malaysia in our public healthcare system sort of like provides support for transgender who wants to undergo, what do you call it? Transitioning, right? But the same support is no longer given due to like, I think some people would quote a politicization of Islam and things like that in Malaysia. So I want to direct the next question to Dr. Anne, and I apologize because it will be quite a difficult one. So the World Health Organization in 2018, 17 I think, released the 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases, ICD-11, which includes the long overdue removal of all trans-related diagnoses from the mental disorders chapter. Can you share with us a little bit in Malaysia, officially in our Ministry of Health, do we also recognize this, or how far, if we don't, like, how far along are we from recognizing this? Also taking into consideration, like, Malaysia Baru, new government, empower and all things like that. Okay, thanks, because basically when you talk about this issue, it's a little bit sensitive, especially in our Malaysian society. And I think we do have to discuss this with very, very, must be caution discussing and actually providing the words. Basically, when you talk about the issue, it falls under the disease control division, which is under the, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't come under the mental health. It doesn't come under the issues being addressed by mental health at the Ministry of Health level. So I think there's some efforts being done. And sorry, before you go on, is that correct? Do you agree with that classification? The fact that it's not given to the mental health unit. Okay, I do agree because there's a lot of classifications that even is not under, for example, like gaming addiction. It comes under mental health, but it is not put under the mental health purview in
ministry. So, however, I think there are efforts being done, and I have to actually check at this point of time what is being done, because when we talk about issues of LGBTs, there was actually it's being actually discussed not at Malaysian level at this point of time. It's being discussed at an ASEAN or even WHO Geneva level. So I could not basically say what is the Ministry of Health stand at this moment, because it falls under the with the Malaysian government. There's a lot of things going on lah. But basically, in terms of the what do you call it, the definition, it will probably go towards how do we actually fit into that in terms of ministry, what are the efforts that we're going to do. Because previously when they actually proposed that, for example, because issue ni macam very sensitive, some people from abroad actually when they went for meeting, they proposed that in our government sector, in the clinic kesihatan, to have a proper lane just for the LGBTs. That was one of the proposal. It was actually put up not just LGBTs, tetapi if you do that, you're further going to destigmatize them, right? Because you're going to have a lane, they're going to say that, oh yes, these are the people, and you are actually going to identify them, further stigmatize. So there were many issues being discussed, but on top of that, there are also some rationalization why they want that. So those are the things probably I can answer at this point in time. Yeah, of course, definitely.
I'm not familiar with that particular proposal, but I know that the Malaysian civil society, in engaging with this issue on the human rights level, have always asked for integration of services.
Yes.
Basically,
I think it was proposed by an individual. It came up to our level, and we answered that. But basically, it does not transpire anywhere. It's not shown anywhere. But there was because it came to the mental health unit, and we had to discuss with the HIV unit. So basically, we have another unit also helping on this. So
I think it's good to know that at least some discussion at the ministry level is happening, because I think like the long wait could bring a lot of injustice to people who are facing this issue on a day-to-day basis. So I want to direct the next question to Dr. Ang from a MMHA perspective, maybe from also a lobbying perspective. Can we expect like more coordination efforts, like in terms of like working with civil societies, to maybe lobby and support and push the ministry to also provide this recognition as per ICD 11?
I think we have not discussed this at the national level, and I will be able to answer. But certainly, as a form of support, for example, we have got once the LGBT group they wanted to use MMHA as a venue for their meeting, because they have difficulties even to find a safe place for them to meet. Now, as far as we are concerned, it's no problem, because we serve those who are in need, and a lot of them are actually having mental health issues. So we don't know whether they are this group or what sexual group and all this, because that is not what we are, or for them or against them. We don't take a stand on the sexuality. We look at them as people who have got mental health issues, and they need to have an avenue, for them to discuss and to meet. And we give them support in that sense. But as to working with other groups, we have not come to this as yet.
So I think maybe that's something that Rizla, Dr. Ang and Dr. Ann can talk about after the forum. I want to move this discussion to the media and pop culture a little bit. So if you look at shows on Netflix these days, and if you also look at the kind of movies that we watch, there's a popular use of mental health in pop culture. For example, we have 13 Reasons Why. We also have the series Dexter, and there's also this movie called Split, involving the main character who has like various split personalities, right? So I want to ask Dr. Elvin about this. Do you think this is a positive thing or a negative thing?
I think as with any kind of media portrayal, it's always both. If you have positive, you have negative. The positive side is people start asking questions, is it really like that? I get asked questions because, oh, you're a psychologist. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you. That's it. Yeah, as with the movie Split, I don't know about direction and the rest because I don't know much TV, so no time. Anyway, the good is people start asking questions, people start having conversations about it, looking for more information, so and then you can start comparing. The bad is if you don't do that, you just think, okay, mental illness is that split, you must have like 13 characters. 2 is not split enough. Just both.
Right, so also, because this relates to the debate that we had earlier, right? So I want to maybe ask Gisela about this as well. Responsible journalism and portrayal of mental illness and mental health in the media, right? If there are a few things that you want to highlight, that things that the media should take into account before they do this reporting, like what are your concerns and what are the messages that you would like to tell them in the way that these things are portrayed in the media?
I think one of the main things is how a lot of the time discussions around mental health only come up during times of crisis, right? And it's very sensationalized. And it's very hard to have an engaged discussion about mental health when you are facing an emotional sort of situation like suicide. It happens a lot. It's in the last few months. It's happened a few times in Malaysia already. There was a young girl who committed suicide, and then the celebrities who committed suicide as well. It's hard to have an engaged discussion when everybody's emotions are very, very high. Right? That's number one. Number two, because so much of the discussion is focused around suicide, people think that's the only element about mental illness that should be focused on. Right? When, like what we talked about so far, mental health is such a complex sort of topic that you need to address it on multiple levels. And it's not just about prevention, it's also about empowerment, it's also about communities, and a whole bunch of other issues that we've talked about already. And the third thing is that, it's coming back to responsible journalism. I really do wish that the Malaysian media practitioners were a little bit more responsible in how they report, whether it's suicide or mental health. And the focus is always on, I think what was covered in the debate, what happened? How do you detect suicide? When in actual fact, you cannot detect suicide. You cannot predict who is going to commit suicide. There are computer algorithms, or even artificial intelligence cannot predict this, right? But it tends to skew the discussion only in one way, and it's very unfair and not a good way to start educating people and destigmatizing mental health.
Before Dr. Ann give your comment, just a heads up to the audience, I'll be taking your questions right after Dr. Ann, so you can start thinking about and analyzing the wordings in your head. So Dr. Ann.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I think when you talk about the media, it's more of when you talk about responsible journalism. I think I share with Ms. Labida when we say that it's supposed to be responsible media reporting. But the challenges is because media, they're not governed by one body. They have like Astro Awani is another, RTM is another, you have Winter Harian. So basically, for example, you get things like, for example, when we reported that 40% of school children had some form of mental health issues ataupun mental health problems. They report as 40% murid sekolah ada sakit mental. I had a heart attack of my life at that point of time to answer. Okay, so basically when we talk about media, we probably have to educate media to something, and it's a tough challenge because recently the efforts of the Ministry of Health is actually to recognize media yang do good reporting on mental health, specifically on mental health. So we have certain figures from, for example, New Straits Times, the Stars, and then we are still working on it to settle. But I think it has to go beyond when you talk about empowerment. It has to go to beyond like working with the people in the film industry, or even in university you are a Bachelor of Arts, where you have film, where you make short films, like
for example, UITM or probably even tailors, you work with this kind of students, we have to work with this kind of students to actually educate them on how to actually portray and how to actually make that particular short film, short drama. Because I can tell you, kalau siapa, maybe some of you do not see, you see a lot of English movies, but if a lot of Malay movies, tak kira lah, semua Malay movies yang cinta-cintut semuanya ada mental health issues. Okay, hero Cinderella lah, apa lagi, macam-macam kan. A lot of recently the Tiara Mona Lisa, whatever that Mona Lisa story, now is episode 80, got mental health issues. So and sometimes as what Dr. Abi was saying, when people ask you, is this how mental illness ke? You know, they portray, for example, injuk dekat hospital, orang lari-lari kan. So people have different perspective about what mental issues and mental health and mental illness is all about. It's about those people running on the street, cakap sorang-sorang. That is not how it is. You know, not even in hospital bahagia. I would say you have to go to hospital bahagia to see how the patients are like and not presume and assume from outside that hospital bahagia punya memang sama macam what they show in the media. Betul kan Datin kan? Datin is always laughing because I think she's actually promoting for the past berapa puluh tahun talking about mental health and it's still in the struggle. So basically, I think it has to go beyond, and I think that is what we have to do. We have to work with Ministry of Youth, the universities, and actually educate them on how actually we should portray mental illness. So if we have ideas on how the movie should be like, satu, and the other one is when you talk about responsible reporting. I wish yes, the media would highlight more on toxic behavior rather than to portray tali gantung. And recently, just a little bit more, if everybody followed the loss of our beloved baby Adam Raikal, you know, and when they put up on Facebook, you know, because people are saying that, you know, kenapa mak as a staff nurse mother should actually ask why are you sending him to a nursery ke atau penjaga pengasuh. That causes a lot of mental issues. The mental health impact for that particular mother and the father, because I was there at forensic. And you know, when people say sabar, when people say no, people do not realize that all these things actually relate to the impact of severe mental health issues in this particular mother. So it has to go beyond. If you talk about the media, it has to go beyond.
Then I'm also curious because on one hand you talk about creating awareness and educating our media platforms and agencies to be more sensitive about this issue, but on the other hand, I'm also curious, like in the event that they are not sensitive, in the event that they are not responsible, are there any organizations or bodies that sort of put them to be accountable or punish them?
At this moment, to tell you the truth, because media is not governed, so probably we have to talk to MCMC
to govern the right aspects.
Yes. So that's our job lah. So anybody who wants to help me, not just me lah, the people in the government, because government are, unfortunately, Datin has been in the government and she's been out of the system. I envy her actually. So sometimes when you're out of the system, you can talk. That's nice, you know. So I'm in the government side, so I have to actually support the government in whatever they're doing, but at the same time actually try to also promote what other people think what we should do, like Prof. Alvin, Datin. I have to actually tell them that you must say this so that the government will do this. Okay?
All right, thank you so much to all the panelists. I want to open the Q&A session right now. So can I get a show of hands of who are interested to ask questions? We got 1, 2, okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll do 2, 2, and 2. First. So please raise your hand so Harvard knows where to go. Before you ask your question, tell us your name and if there's any specific question you're directing the question to.
Hi, my name is Luan. I'm a third-year medical student from Newcastle University in Johor. I guess my question is directed towards everyone on the panel, or maybe rather those of you who are still practicing. It's quite a medical student kind of question. It's more of See, when I'm shadowing doctors, or when I'm in a clinical settings observing doctors, what I realize is that when they're faced with mental health patients, a lot of them actually shy away from it. They don't really know how to deal with it. And I find that a bit weird because we are medical practitioners who are supposed to be trained to deal with all these kinds of things. And I'm just wondering, what can be done to change the perceptions of a lot of doctors who face these problems in healthcare? And, or maybe rather, what can I do as a medical student to kind of deal with this?
All right, thank you. Next question.
I have two questions. So the first one is for Dr. N, and the second one is just general. So the first question is about. So just now you said about if as long as so for example, if you have high stress level and you have high coping mechanism skill, then it's fine. If you have low skill in coping mechanism, for example, but also have low stress level, it's fine. So my question is, so since people have different types of coping mechanism in terms of that, sometimes I smoke, sometimes I drink. Some people cut themselves as a coping mechanism also. So my question is, like, I actually don't know what the question is, but like, so like basically, like, in what sense does it, like, what does it extend to in terms of like the standard of what is okay to cope? Yeah. That's
the second question.
The second question is, this is about counseling. So in counseling in unis and schools itself. So like in my uni, is that the counseling that I go to is that they said that it is true that you're above 18, but you're still under the care of your parents. And then so like in the counseling session that I had before, they said that so if you have done self-harm before, or you're thinking of harming someone else in that sense, we're likely to have to report to your parents. So what is your opinion about this? Which is to say that the last time I was, because before this I was suicidal, and I want to talk about it with my counselor, but unfortunately if I talk to them, they'll report to my parents, and then my parents will make some issues. So I just want to know about your opinion.
All right, thank you so much for the questions. I'll ask the first question to Gisela first. Perceptions about doctors who shy away from mental illness, and what can be done to address the issue?
So it is an unfortunate fact that even doctors, there is stigma on mental health amongst doctors as well in Malaysia. I've had patients who came to me who had to really fight with their doctors to get letters of referral to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, right? Lately, I also heard of a doctor who laughed at my patient when they said that they wanted to come and see a psychologist, because a psychologist talks and does nothing else. Okay, so the stigma amongst medical doctors, medical practitioners against mental health practitioners is very real. I'm struggling to think about what can be done other than engaging with doctors, all the doctors, to help them understand the work that mental health professionals do and how important it is. But also, I think what is really quite heartening is that a lot of the new medical syllabus are including topics of mental health, are discussing the importance of mental health professionals, and also highlighting that as an issue in medical curriculum. Right? From what I understand, all the medical curriculum, they didn't really cover it. I was briefly, very, very briefly, a medical student. Right? For 2 years, I attended medical school. Sorry? Well, I went to a private university where there was a topic called behavioral science, but it was 1 week in a semester. Right? And I think the new way of teaching medicine is to incorporate that across every module. And so that is, I think, a positive step forward. But I think what also needs to be done is to engage with doctors, especially young doctors, to help them deal with this difficult point. What do you do when someone, this is the questions I get asked by doctors, what do you do when someone is crying? What do you do when someone is, grieving? how do you comfort? How do you console? So this is the very real ways that the doctors need to be, empowered in dealing with this, but also to understand that mental health is also an important element, and you can make referrals. You don't have to have all the answers.
Right, thank you, Visma. So, Dr. Ed, you want to...
Before I answer to that question, I would like to respond to about the curriculum, because when you talk about doctors do not know how to actually handle mental health issues, yes, I was a medical student. When we were in medical school, we learned about psychiatry. We did not learn about mental health. I was put in the mental health unit in the year late in 2003, 2004, masa tu, nothing was still in the system. And at that point of time, I learned about mental health. It's totally different. It's totally how you handle the people and you handle the patients, because even when you have mental illness, you have a patient having mental illness, they need to have good mental health. Ini yang banyak orang kadang-kadang kata, oh, mental health is just referring to people who are well. Okay, fine. Referring to that, I think on the from the 1st of August until the 3rd of August, inshallah, two of the Ministry of Health officer, which is myself, will be going to Bangkok to actually look into the formation of mental health module in the doctors and nurses. That means undergraduate nurses and doctors. So which is something that we have been fighting for so many years, to actually incorporate the mental health module, not just about psychiatry, but actually how do you handle, when you say how to handle grieving. Those who probably know psychological first aid will probably know how to do that, how to handle a person when she's crying. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything, you just have to be there with water and tissue. Kadang-kadang benda-benda macam tu. But these are the things that sometimes people do not know. The simplest thing pun orang tak boleh nak buat because you do not have that knowledge. So I think it is most important that we incorporate that particular mental health module with the life skills into the doctor's curriculum undergraduate.
You also wanted to respond to the second question. What are okay ways to cope?
What are okay ways to cope? Okay. Basically, some people, as you said, some people choose when you actually deliberately harm yourself. For some particular youth or people or individuals, that's their way of coping, which is actually the negative way of coping. So when you talk about coping skills can vary. For example, but you look at the positive coping skills. For example, learning to talk to a person. That's one of the coping skills that we are advocating. For example, when we talk about #depression, let's talk. So when you have problems or you have any issues, you find somebody that you trust. When you say what kind of level of coping, the positive coping skills, so that you have to educate yourself. That means you have to read out and you have to probably talk to a mental health professional to find out what are the positive levels of coping and see at what level are you okay or are you not okay. But having said that, among the things that you can do as a first step when you know that I'm not, because I met somebody who was saying, I don't feel right, but I don't know whether I'm actually having depression or I'm having mental health issues, I just don't feel right. My head doesn't say this, my heart says this, So probably you find somebody that you trust among your family members or even your peers and your friends, to just talk about it. Find someone that you trust to start off with. Then probably later get some help and seek out and reach out to a person who's actually a mental health professional, be it a medical doctor who knows about mental health, be it a counselor, be it a clinical psychologist, or even a psychiatrist. Banyak orang psychiatrists are not here, but psychiatrists will say that please do not be afraid to see us because we are not harimau. We don't eat you. But sometimes even to see in the private sector is a little bit different. You have money, you can see a psychologist. In the government sector, it's a different setting. You need to see a psychiatrist even before you are referred to a clinical psychologist. And sometimes you do not need medication. Sometimes you do. So when you see your level of coping of okay, you've got to have check and balance. That's what talk to another person. Try to actually help from outside, for example, from a mental health professional, and do the other things that actually try to actually how do I say it? Enroll ataupun involve in the things that you're passionate about. Because one of the things macam I just want to highlight a little bit what Alvin was saying. 5 orang, 1 orang, we are concentrating on only one person. We're not concentrating on the other 4, the neighbors and things. So among us, we have probably family members and friends. Possibly kita ada kurang-kurang pun kita ada 10 people that we probably care about. You know, we have our parents. So have a look out on the symptoms of depression, because these are the early warning signs. For the moment that you feel sad and it extends 2 weeks, selalunya 2 weeks, everybody feels sad. You ada kematian, accident, mak masuk hospital, everybody feels sad. You know, you don't get good results. You know, all these things, you get scolded by your parents, or yes, you feel sad. But the sadness occurs more than 2 weeks, and you lost pressure, you lost interest in the things that you like to do. If the things extend than 2 weeks, then you need help. Itu satu. I can tell you, living with person with depression, siapa yang pernah hidup dengan orang depression will know. It's not easy because you need to help your, for example, your particular spouse, your particular sister, or even your what you call brothers. You know, you need to help get them out of bed. Tolong diorang mandi, you know, because they don't want to bathe. You know, and sometimes help them to eat. You know. Paksa mereka makan, get them to go for exercises. So I think the early warning signs to the people who are living with people with depression, so that people can be more compassionate to help. That's my answer. Thank you.
And for the final question, I'm going to ask Dr. Ang about unsupportive parents when they're supposed to be involved when you're dealing with a child, right? He's asking about your views about how to deal with unsupportive parents. Yeah, also about breaching confidentiality. Breaching confidentiality between the doctor and the child or child patient. Do you want to help me with that?
Sorry, just to clarify, your question was, as university students, your counseling unit, their policy is if you self-harm, although you're over 18, they will inform your parents. So it's breaching.
Well, I suppose, you know, when things that it is life-threatening, then that confidentiality part, I suppose, because of the protection of the person, then, you know, you don't talk about confidentiality anymore. It's just like you want to commit suicide, and you know, and because I seek help with the counselor, and the counselor just you know, keep it at that level. But if you really, you know, want to commit suicide, then there is this responsibility, and there's a life that is at stake. So I think there has got to be that consideration. Now the other thing is, I suppose it may be out of fear. You know, why is it that you know, you want to keep it that confidential? There may be some issues, and I suppose, well, if it's out of something that is rational and there are some avenues, maybe I've not practiced this, and I do not really know how it works. But the only thing is I can see is if life is at stake, then you know, it goes beyond the person, you know, who manages you. It has got to go to somebody who is responsible for you, because you are not able to manage it, and therefore, you know, it has got to be somebody else who can be responsible for you.
Just to add on to what Dr. Ang has said, this is ethics when it comes to practicing psychology or counseling, right? The only time we're allowed to breach confidentiality is when we think there is a risk, the person is at risk to their own safety or the safety of other people. Right? So it's not a law, it's more of a professional ethics. So your counselor is wanting to engage with your parents if you do report suicide ideation is actually good practice, right? And there's probably good that good value coming out of that, because suicide is a complex issue and you can't just deal with it through 1 hour sessions once a week. You do need a comprehensive, all-rounded approach. And in that situation, usually family, friends, things like that will be necessary in dealing with the situation. Professionally, what we usually do is if someone reports suicide, we have to try and get them admitted. In hospitals, there's something called suicide watch. Okay, so the college may not want to do that, but engaging parents or family in the care of a suicidal person can also come under a different way of suicide watch.
All right, thank you so much for the help and for the explanation. Let's get to this next two questions. Can you raise your hands? Yeah,
Hi, my name is Andrew, and my question is open to anyone on the panel. So, I just want to divert a bit from the topic at hand. I am actually concerned about workplace stress and mental illness in the corporate life. So my question is, because now we're moving forward towards more promotion of mental wellness in corporate jobs as well. So the question is, what kind of interventions should organizations promote to protect the mental illness of their employees?
all right, thank you. How about the questions here? Hi, I actually have two questions. I'm actually diagnosed with depression since a few years ago, but recently it worsened much more because I had at least 3 suicide attempts. So then, to make it short, I've been changing meds since a couple months ago, and now I'm on Seroquel. Morning 100 milligram and at night 200 milligrams. And the last time I met my psychiatrist, I asked him whether is it possible that I have bipolar disorder, because I feel like I have sudden change of mood, extreme change of mood. So that's why I asked him. And other than that, I looked for an article about my medication, Seroquel. And I read that it's for bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. So I want to know for this one, I want to know, how do you really know if you have bipolar disorder? How long does it take for each episode to happen? Like, for instance, I heard one of my friends say that it'll only take a day, but another friend of mine who did bachelor in psychology, she said around 7 days. That is my first question. And my second question is that I read articles in the website saying that this is in the US. They don't really agree about taking antidepressants, especially for teenagers, because instead of helping them, it actually worsens them. The suicidal thoughts are more frequent. And this is from what I read in the website. So what do you think of this? Does antidepressant really help depressed people? All right, Dr. Alvin will take the first question about workplace stress interventions that corporations can take to promote mental wellness at the workplace.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that question because I'm also trying to push for that. Last year's World Mental Health Day's theme was mental health in the workplace. Okay. And I think Malaysia is quite slow to take that on. Many countries in the West, in the more first world countries, have got this thing called Employee Assistance Program. Have you heard of it? And it can be quite expensive because as an organization, you pay to outsource a company to help your employees with any mental health issues, and can be your employees' mental health issues or your employees' families' mental health issues. Even just day-to-day kind of distress with say childcare or something like that can be under employee assistance program or EAP for short. And this is a kind of support that organizations can give. But I think it's a bit slow in Malaysia because we are more likely to spend money on infrastructure than this kind of services. So EAP is one way to go about it. And secondly, if you can identify certain people within the organization who are able to provide support, you can do that. Like I'm from Sunway University, and at the university we have got like a We Care team. There are certain people identified to be able to provide some kind of, say, basic counseling to anyone who needs it. And the thing is, we try to approach it in a way that tells you, as long as you feel not so okay, seek help straight away. It rhymes, right? As long as you feel not so okay, seek help straight away. Yeah, seek help. Just like when you having a sore throat, you seek help straight away. You don't wait until you're serious, because by the time you're serious, it takes a much longer time and a lot of money to help. So these are the things that you can do. For the second question, I'm just going to answer partially, and then the rest also to contribute. When it comes to medication, we need to firstly understand that pills do not teach you skills within your lives. Yeah, and yes, pills may be able to help reduce symptoms, but they do not teach you the skills to manage the symptoms when they come. And I like to say when they come, because just because you're diagnosed with something doesn't mean you always have the symptom. And it's very, very frustrating for anyone who's diagnosed with any kind of so-called disorder to tell people, because I'm sure you get friends who ask you, bipolar, but you're okay, what? That's very frustrating, isn't it? Because you know sometimes you're not okay. And it's ironic because when you have a diagnosis, people expect you to have the symptoms all the time. It's ironic because you're trying to not have the symptoms. And then you're told, no, you're depressed, you're supposed to be depressed. Show depression now. Like, right? So how do you deal with that is a skill. So apart from medication, you need to learn skills. That's for you. And it's not for other people, it's a tailor-made kind of thing. And that's where psychologists, counselors, mental health social workers, mental health nurses can help, right? Not just psychologists. When it comes to the medication you're asking, I didn't quite catch that. How long does it take to work, or how long does it?
What I meant is the bipolar.
Oh, when you swing.
Yes.
Some say 1 day, some say 7 days.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell. There's no formula. It can be one hour you swing, then you wait for next 7 days, or sometimes you don't swing within a whole month. It's really very hard.
How do you differentiate between the normal people and those who have bipolar?
Right, so I think I'll direct the question to Dr. Ann. So the question is, basically, how do you know that you have bipolar disorder? What's the time factor? So because there's no standard, I think she's concerned about how do you differentiate? Is it like a usual ones that you have on a daily basis, or is it a bipolar? How does she know if it's bipolar?
Just to let you know, there are many bipolar people who are actually working productively in many ministries. So first of all, I think I would like to congratulate you because it's not easy to admit that I have depression. Can you give a and you're on medication. Okay, first, when you talk about bipolar, and selalunya bipolar is basically, because I deal with, my friends are a lot of psychiatrists, kan banyak dari hari dan jumpa. Bipolar is basically that means your mood changes. That means on a certain period of time, you have this manic behavior. You like to spend and you become very motivated to do things. For example, like going on air. You tak pernah buat benda-benda. Yeah, it's true. You know, going on air, spend trip. You know, you spend on a lot of buying things and things like that. And on other days, you'll be very, very down. Your mood will be very, you tak boleh bangun daripada tidur. You cannot even get out of your bed. And then you try to be motivated because previously you were a staff, and suddenly you start to notice that probably your punch card is all turning red, you know, and that can be, but then it's your own self-diagnosis. So tetapi you need to see a psychiatrist, and my advice is actually you need to get diagnosed properly. That's first step. That means seeing a doctor ataupun a psychiatrist to be diagnosed.
I know, because now she's not even, remember you are not even sure, because people say that.
Because I've asked my doctor, is it possible that I have bipolar? And he said it's possible.
It's possible, but you need to get it properly diagnosed. And to me, there are patients yang sometimes see the fourth doctor baru get properly diagnosed. So you need to get it properly diagnosed, and you cannot be a Google doctor. Google on, because this is true. I've had patients because who come actually and see, please, what do I do? Because I suspect that this doctor says I have depression, this doctor says I have bipolar, and things like that. So in terms of medication, when you said that when you take medication, antidepressants, you read that it's worsening. Most of the time that I know the patients that we see in the ministry, it does not worsen, because you need to take that medication because to actually control you during that time. Tetapi at that same time, you need to learn the skills. For example, we have things like cognitive behavioral therapy. The psychologist will teach you if you're depressed. You know, you have this particular macam timber. You have what is that? Timber is pale, where you actually have holes in it, and how do you channel your emotions when you are having that symptoms at that point of time. So these are the things that the skills that you need to learn on top of the medication to control. So how long you take the medication will depend on the psychiatrist, on the medical doctor, ataupun doctors to actually advise you.
That's exercising or following diet helps also.
You have to
hold on. I'm going to stop this. You can have a further conversation after the forum, please stay. So I'm going to ask Vizla the third question. Is it okay to take antidepressants? Does it worsen your condition?
I think antidepressants has got a very bad rep in media. Okay, all psychiatric medication seems to have a bad rep in media. And a lot of the discussion from the US is not applicable to other parts of the world. I think the way the medicine industry is conducted in the US is very, very different. It has its own politics. It has, its own, it's very problematic, all right? And in Malaysia, we do not have the same system. In Malaysia, our psychiatric medication is under one of the Controlled Drugs Act, all right? And doctors do not overprescribe. Okay, and doctors also do not simply prescribe. There's a very tight schedule doctors have to follow, psychiatrists have to follow in prescribing medication. Okay, so I would say when you read a lot of the stuff about antidepressants coming from the US, do be cautious and keep this in mind. Right? There's a lot of politics involved in medicine in the US. That's not applicable to Malaysia. Right? That's number one. Number two, I think overall, evidence shows that when it comes to mild to moderate depression, a combined treatment, including medication and psychotherapy, is the most effective in dealing with depression. Okay, that's number one. Number two, it's different when it comes to severe depression. That will have a very different protocol of treatment. So it will also, the diagnosis is not just about what it is, but also how severe it is. How long your medication will be prescribed for will depend on that. And also the dose will depend on these aspects and how long you've had the symptom for, right? The longer the symptoms are untreated, go untreated, the higher the initial doses will be, and then it will taper off. That's usually how a lot of psychiatrists would approach medication. Okay. Your question on adolescents, again, it has been found to be safe, but it will depend on the dose and the duration. Does that answer your questions? Yeah.
Can I get a show of hands on how many questions do we have? All right, that's two more, because we're actually running out of time. Can I suggest that those who have questions stay back and talk to the panelists after the forum? So we'll be concluding the session right now. So we've talked about, in the forum, we talked about understanding, we talked about understanding mental health, we talked about the media, we talk about children, we talk about gender, we talk about the kind of actions that could be taken. But all of the panelists here have told us today to always talk to someone, seek help, seek guidance whenever you're unsure. And in cases like more severe instances of mental health issues, always get proper diagnosis and things like that. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
That is a great discussion. Thank you very much for that. That is much needed for everyone. And we'd like to look into sharing that with the general public. And again, thank you very much. For anything, I'd like to express our gratitude to Malaysian Mental Health Association for endorsing this event. And with that, I'd like to pass the mic to keep closing.
Okay, first of all, oh, I see. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Irosa. Okay. Yeah, first of all, I want to congratulate the organizing committee, for having this event. I think it is one of those very engaging ones, and people having very enthusiastic sessions, and it has been a very beneficial morning. And from the debate to the panel discussions, and I hope all of you have been very much more enlightened on the issues on mental health and mental illness. Now, not everything can be addressed, but we hope that it would open up more avenues and opportunities for you to share whatever you've learned here to the others, because mental health is really very relevant for all of us, and we really hope that this message that it is people with mental illness doesn't necessarily look the way we think or what has been portrayed in the media. And we also hope that it will also give courage to people who have got mental health issues to seek help, and to look for the, including yourself, to be able to help the others. Now, we in the Malaysian Mental Health Association, we actually also trying to promote, this mental health awareness and literacy. Like in the workplace, for example, we are now moving to the corporate sector. That's why we are getting the license for the mental health first aid, as a way to reach out to the corporate sector through training and utilizing the Human Resource Development Fund, and trying to get them to promote the mental health, promoting work environment, getting the management to be sensitive to mental health issues and be supportive to their employees with mental health problems. Now, the other thing is, I must say that we also do have a call-in service and drop-in, walk-in service. So if there are people that you know of who have got problems and they need somebody to talk to, we even go and visit the people. So you can contact us. Now, I think this evening, this morning, we have got the panelists from different sectors, from the Ministry of Health, from practitioner, educational base, and from the NGO, but we don't have the psychiatrists here. So, some question, one particular question has not been clearly one for that. Maybe it will help to talk to the psychiatrist further. So I think that's all that I have to say, and I once again wish to thank the audience for your participation and for sitting through this session.